I sat across from Tony Coleman in 7th grade English class. He was tall, skinny, and had just enough facial hair to make a pretty decent mustache. He was also funny, but borderline too funny he's gonna get into trouble kind of way, and he often did. But I liked him. Fortunately for me, he liked me too. At school dances, he'd always ask me to dance, and in class, he always smiled at me. And by spring, we were dating. For us, that meant flirting in class and taking walks with his friend Len, who'd walk a few steps behind us. Tony was a pretty stellar first catch, right? We were attracted to each other in many ways, but there were some things that just didn't click. Tony smoked, I didn't. Tony mellowed out to stoner music, and I listened to anything that was playing on Z104. And Tony was a pretty awful student while I was on the honor roll. So like many middle school relationships, we broke up after 1 week. We were just different people who wanted different things. I still liked Tony, but sticking with him as his girlfriend just wasn't for me. I knew that whoever I dated or who I hung out with was likely the person I'd become. This was even more true for me when I was in high school. When I was 16, I made a decision to follow Christ. But how my faith played out every day was still a mystery to me, especially when it came to dating and marriage. In my senior year of high school, I started dating this guy named Jim. He played on the varsity soccer team, he played trumpet in the band, his guy friends were friends with my girlfriends. So when we started dating, everything seemed right. We had the same friends, we had the same classes, basically we had a lot in common. He went to church, so I figured we were on the same page there too. So we dated, we went on fun dates, I met his parents, he met mine. We hung out all the time and we stayed up way too late on the phone with each other. At the same time, I was growing in my faith. Yeah, I led a Sunday school class and I was part of my youth group, but it was really conversations with my sister and my best friend, both of whom were Christians, that prompted me to ask some really good questions about my life. Whenever we talked about Jesus or whenever I read the Bible, something stirred in me. I journal about this God that loved me and wanted to know me. I journal about him and how he wanted to invite me on this amazing adventure to care for people who were often shunned or people who were looked down upon. He wanted me to not worry about my future or stress out about what I was going to wear to school. He wanted to know me, and I loved him. So because Jim and I were friends, I'd start talking about God with him. And of course, because he liked me, he was really nice about it. He'd smile, he'd nod in agreement, but then he'd say that he wanted nothing to do with this God. I really wrestled with that. Here was a guy that I was dating who wanted to know me, who wanted to hang out with me, but he didn't want to know the God that created me and him, and knew me and him. Of course, this situation wasn't new. Thousands of years ago, this guy Paul, who wrote a lot of the New Testament, wrote, "Don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can goodness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? What harmony can there be between Christ and the devil? How can a believer be a partner with an unbeliever? And what union can there be between God's temple and idols? For we are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will live in them and walk among them. I will be their God and they will be my people. Therefore, come out from them and separate yourselves from them, says the Lord. Don't touch their filthy things, and I will welcome you. And I will be your father, and you will be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty." Okay, so what Paul's really saying here is not that Christians shouldn't be friends with people who don't follow Jesus, but he is offering a warning about the danger of being too tightly bound to people who aren't Christians, especially in dating and in marriage. Jim wasn't interested in knowing God, and the closer I became to God, the more I understood that Jim wasn't going to move towards God with me. And I knew that God didn't want my halfway devotion. He wanted all of it. So I made the decision to break up with him. As I grew in my relationship with God, reading the Bible, talking to other Christians, I learned that what I needed most was to make strong connections with other believers so we could encourage one another and challenge one another to stay focused on Christ. I knew that I'd become like the people I hung out with, and I wanted to be the kind of person who loved God with my whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. So I made sure to find friends who wanted the same. I also knew that if I got married, I wanted to be with someone who'd help me become that person. I knew that if I married someone who wasn't a follower of Jesus, that I might be drawn away from God, and I didn't want that. Years later, when I met John, I knew I was going to marry him. Yes, he had a beard. I love beards. And yes, he made me laugh harder than anyone ever had, and yes, our conversations were fun and deep and meaningful, but he also had this relationship with God that was alive. He talked about God so personally and practiced living out his faith in a way that was so attractive. I just wanted to be around him. I knew that he would help me grow closer to Christ. Marriage is likely a long ways off for many of you, but who you date now or who you hang out with is helping you form the kind of person you want to become. If you want to follow Jesus, think wisely about who you make your strongest relationships with. You're in a room right now with a lot of people who are interested in learning about God. Get to know each other, encourage one another. If we who call ourselves Christians take even a small step towards the kind of relationships that Paul calls us to, can you imagine what that would look like? Maybe it would be guys who respect girls with their words and actions. Maybe it would be girls who speak well of guys both in front of them and behind their backs. Maybe we'd be the kind of people who treat each other as though God really does live in each of us. That's my prayer for you and for me.